Thank you for coming to Coffee Talk 3.0. I'm Peg, Chris, Lisa, and Margaret. So one of the issues that we had talked about were lights off at the town barn. So this was to help Mrs. Lipka, who had been a good neighbor to Berlin while the town barn was being built. And she had to put up with the dust and the dirt and all the construction around her house. So she had come to us. We had gone to Richard Hanks, our building inspector guy, Dave Smith. They looked around, made sure that the lights that stayed on at the barn were adequate enough so that we weren't in violation of any occupancy, which they were not. So check, lights are off. Mrs. Lipka, very happy. Traffic concerns. Unfortunately, Chief Tom is not here tonight, but this had come up a couple times, that people were very concerned about trying to get out of Pleasant, come into town, get out of South Street, head towards Clinton, Gates Pond, God love them, now they need to cross 4 lanes of traffic to come into town, the crosswalks to get across back and forth to the general store, and then just a little bit around the corner by the old burying ground. And then, of course, 5 corners, which the rules of the road apply. Don't make eye contact. Person with the crappiest car goes first. So I know that Tom is meeting with some folks about the traffic concerns to see what can be done, whether it's in terms of a study, whether it's counting cars, whether it's counting types of cars, whether it's looking at specific times. So unfortunately, without Tom here, I don't have a lot of information on this, but just know that it's at the top of his list. One of the other items, citizens had talked to us about speeding. Down Lancaster Road, down South Street, down Pleasant Street. I know that the chief is very open to, if you call him and give him permission, well, he and his staff, to sit in your driveway or sit on your property, they'll sit and they'll catch them. There was actually one day I was outside talking to my neighbor, cars flying up and down up Lyman. Happened, police cruiser went up, flagged him down, said, "Can you sit here?" He said, "Sure." He pulled in. I went in the house. I came back out to offer him a soda. He had already had someone pulled over. So it does work. If you feel that there is a concern on your street regarding the speeding, call up the police department, let Tom and company know. And they're happy to pull in a cruiser as they're doing their stops around town. Trash, everyone's favorite topic. Conservation has been kind enough to provide the large yellow bags. They're still down in the town offices floor. Yeah, so when you first go in town offices, they're on a box right there if you need them, and pick up trash. Let us know, let conservation know if there aren't any bags, and they'll get us some. What we've also done, like we did last year, we reached out to the Sheriff's Department in Worcester and asked if they could assist with sending some folks into town to help clean up some of the streets. They did last year. We've been approved this year, so yay, thank you very much, Worcester Sheriff's Department. So all we need to do is figure out when and where. So if people have suggestions on the roads, I know Lancaster has always come up as a big road issue. Randall has come up over and over again. I think that's where the Fireball Bandit lives.
Or travels.
Or travels. So if anyone has any specific roads that they have in mind for trash pickup, let us know and we'll see what we can do about getting something scheduled to help that. Because obviously we want to keep Berlin clean. And if there's resources that are out there to help us, let's take advantage of them. So thank you for that. And then a couple weeks ago, while reading the Clinton item, I noticed that West Boylston had reached out to their state senator and state rep to sign on to a bill going through the House now about adding on a 5-cent tax for nips. Now, I know that it had gone out a couple years ago to the voters of Massachusetts, and it went down in flames, but I think they're going to try again. So it may not have any impact today. It may not have any impact a month from now. But know that Berlin has also signed on to that. We've reached out to Representative Naughton to let him know that we want to push it through and push our name through to hopefully get this 5-cent tax on the NIPS so that if they aren't returned, the money will go back to the state. So anything that we can do, again, to keep those off the streets of Berlin. Which falls into our next item. Lisa had talked about it earlier about a beautification program for Berlin. And we also had Cheryl
Sharon, who's, I believe, here tonight.
Cheryl, there you are, had come to us a couple weeks ago about the Rotary, not the Rotary to Nowhere, but the larger Rotary that you first encounter by the Autism Center in Berlin regarding its upkeep. So Cheryl had reached out to us. I in turn reached out to Conservation, had reached out to the Economic Development Committee, just trying to get as many people involved as possible. So Cheryl, I know you had a meeting last week. One of the other items in regard to beautification as you drive around town, you might see signs that are on the Verizon poles. We buy ugly houses, yard sale, insert something here on the sign. We had reached out to Verizon and National Grid and asked for permission to rip those signs down because, well, people put them up, but they have a tendency not to take them down. So this is now falling under highway. So they've been going around. Actually, Dave sent in a report. He hasn't pulled any down yet.
No, at a 0 by
Okay. All right. Well, it's new. It's brand new. So I encourage you that if you see them, don't pull over and rip them down. Let us know, let Highway know, and they will go and they will take them down. Because truly, there should be nothing on those poles that are out there, but people just see it as free advertising. Hey, I have a yard sale. They'll go for that. Community involvement. So for those that were had a part in the Easter egg hunt, great, thank you. What I'd like to do is see if there's other opportunities to have some fun in the town. So I don't know if there's any interest in maybe trying to pull together a cornhole tournament, 3-on-3 basketball, wiffle ball. I mean, just something that we can do to draw people, to town, down to South Commons, for fun with that. So think about it. Let me know. We'll see what we can do. Great volunteers. You know what I found with the Easter egg hunt? You ask one person, they ask another, and then all of a sudden you have a team of people. So, kudos to the town for doing that. But if there's other ideas that you can come up with, let me know. I'm happy to go to Rec and talk to them. They were my first stop on the egg hunt journey, so they can be the first stop on the whatever we want to have fun in Berlin with. So CSX, the railroad ties. It had come up a couple times about there's a bunch of ties sitting on Linden. There's some ties over by South and Jones. There's railroad ties heading into Clinton that way on, West Street, around the corner. We had reached out to Representative Naughton to try and help move that. Unfortunately, CSX is one of those government entities that doesn't seem to move very quickly. He had also reached out to Representative Trahan for some help. And actually on the way down here tonight, lo and behold, as I'm whizzing down Linden Street, isn't there a CSX truck sitting at the railroad track? So I stopped and talked to the gentleman, and he said, of course, well, I'm only signal guy, I'm not railroad tie guy. I'm like, okay. Explained our plight and said, what do we do? He said, talk to your selectmen. I giggled and said, okay. After that, he's like, talk to your state rep. And I said, okay. You got anything else? And he said, no. What he did explain is that they're doing it in 10-mile increments, replacing the ties. And because Ken's Steakhouse has a little bit more pull than the town of Berlin, that's where they're starting, is in Framingham. And they're coming whatever way they're deciding to come. He said that CSX was short-handed, so those ties have been sitting there probably for a couple years. Not even sure the condition that they'll be in if they ever decided to use them. He had mentioned that various towns had reached out to CSX and said, hey, we'll do the labor, we'll put it in because sometimes, these aren't just, they're not safe. And the response from CSX was, hey, thanks, but no. The library We know that that will be worked on and discussed to put in some type of septic system over there. We definitely have to get that in by September of next year, or unfortunately the library closes. So I know that there are different entities in town, Dave Smith being one who I keep pinging like every month, what's going on, for that. And the next step is to pull in a design and engineering team. So I don't have an ETA on that, but I'll ping him again and see where we are with that, because obviously we need to save our little library and do what we can. SA Farms, it's starting to get warm. It's starting to smell. I've seen various emails and articles in the paper going by, so I know you've reached out to Northborough.
I had reached out to Northborough. Unfortunately, John Coderre, the town administrator, is on vacation.
Okay.
So I have not heard back from him to see if there's anything more than what you've seen in the newspaper or anything otherwise.
Okay. Because again, we know that this is a Northborough item, but we have a ton of Berlin abutters and it all started with Mrs. Chandler, who flagged me down on Crosby Road about a year ago and said, you need to help, the pond in my backyard is dying, the smell is atrocious. And that's what started our quest to try and work with Northborough, their town administrator, their selectmen. We signed on to something that went
Some
to the
legislation.
Yep, some legislation.
Try to change a few things, who's under who.
So again, another process that is unfortunately critical and important, but very slow moving to try and resolve with that. Capes of Berlin, I know that there's been some chatter online about that. Didn't know if you wanted to give an update on well testing and...
Actually, the well testing needs to go through Mark Rhodes, and I believe Paul is the one who spoke with the abutters.
And then the last one that I had on our list, it had come up last meeting, about getting the town report and the articles out a little bit more than a week before the town meeting. And if you were at the town meeting, we know that there was some discussion around how to do that. I'm not sure where that is. Town report people have anything we can share?
The easiest way would be to start splitting out the warrant and the annual town report so that the annual town report is not reliant on the warrant. And I think we do need a bylaw change for that, and I think that's maybe something we should look at for fall, is that piece of it.
Okay.
I think there are other pieces we should maybe go further, but that may be a piece that we could do in fall and then split those two apart so that you can get your annual town report early, and then if the warrant is taking a little bit longer because of finance, though we also, I'm hoping that Margaret can help us smooth that process, because right now there are just so many moving pieces and there's not somebody really gathering everyone together. So I think that she will play that role, and that should help.
So, I mean, that's all that I was able to find in versions 1 and 2, and I ran them by Lisa and Chris. Was there anything old that gnawing on the back of your hand that we missed, that we need to address, that we can put down? I mean, that's the whole point behind these coffee talks, is you come to us and you tell us what's on your mind, and then we go out and try and figure out if we can fix it, how we can fix it, and when we can fix it.
I think we had talked a while ago about sidewalks in town. It seems like around the DPW thing. But the sidewalks around the center of town are really nice, but the ones that start at Carter Street and go to the corner are in terrible, terrible shape for someone who's legally blind who walks there as a means to get to town. I'm in the road all the time, and I don't like to be in the road, but the road is nicely paved and smooth, so under my feet, that feels a lot better than the broken up sidewalk that was in place not that many years ago, but it's in terrible broken shape.
Yeah, that sounds to me like something that's probably part of the Complete Streets program. And I know that is going forward. I think Tim Wheeler was going to have some more information on how that was going to play out at the end of the month. but I don't have a lot of details now. I do know that they're working on it. There's the MassWorks grant could possibly be used to do some of the Complete Streets work. We did have a discussion, but it's, there's not a lot of details right now.
The board and I signed an employment agreement tonight, and I am going to officially begin in the town of Berlin as its first administrator on July 15th. I was born and raised in Milford, down 495 from here, so I am a native of Worcester County, and much of my family still lives in that area. I went to school at UMass Amherst, and I'm one of those people who, after going to school there, decided to stay in Western Mass. So I do have a home in Deerfield, Mass, with my husband and our dog. My husband is a water superintendent locally, so he is going to be staying at our home in Deerfield during the week while I am relocating here during the week to be close to the town of Berlin and my work. Let's see, I have 2 grown boys, both live in Florida now. And my career, so I've been working in public service now for more than 30 years. I began my career in Amherst in the Department of Public Works as a secretary in 1988. And shortly after that, I moved to the town clerk's office in Amherst, and I spent the next 14 years working for the town of Amherst in the clerk's office, ultimately as the town clerk in Amherst. After that, I moved, my boys were still at home, so I decided that I'd step back for a little bit because I'd been working their entire childhoods, and they were still home, so I took an opportunity, stepped back and worked part-time for a little bit for the state at Greenfield Community College for a couple of years. Then an opportunity arose in the town of Sunderland, which is next door to Amherst, and it was an opportunity to be their town administrator. I wasn't sure I was ready for it. This was back in 2005. I wasn't sure I was ready for it, but after giving it some thought and knowing that that town was really well run, I decided that I'd try. And I spent 10 years nearly 10 years as Sunderland's town administrator. So that was my first introduction, and quite a long introduction into the world of town administration. After I left Sunderland, I went to the town of Rutland as its first administrator, and I spent a little over 3 years for the town of Rutland as their first administrator. At that point in my career, I was commuting back and forth from Deerfield to Rutland every day, so you can imagine that took a bit of a toll. So after 3 years, it was a really hard decision, but after a little over 3 years, I felt that I needed to go back closer to home, and actually went back to the town of Amherst, which is where I am now. And I'll be completing this tenure at Amherst on June 30th. I serve as the town clerk and the clerk of the council currently. Amherst just transitioned from a town government to a city government, so it's been a major governmental shift. And I consider myself fortunate enough to have been on the ground level of this governmental transition as the first clerk of the first city council or town council in the city known as the town of Amherst. And due to changes in my circumstances and my ability to relocate, I'm extremely excited to get back into town administration. It's something that I'm very passionate about. Clearly, town administration in small towns, because that's where I've been and that's where I want to be. So I look forward to meeting all of you and having a chance to talk. I am going to be full-time plus, so you're always going to know where to find me once my office is set up in the town offices, and I do have an open door policy, and I will welcome people coming in to talk. A first town administrator means making a bit of a cultural shift, and so the select board and all the departments have had to be self-reliant. They've done their best to work with each other. What I would bring here is the central administrative piece. So the board's work can be better facilitated through me with assistance from Mary. And for the departments, I can offer help, and my job description actually requires serving as finance director, chief procurement officer, personnel director. So there are a number of things that I'll actually be able to take on and take off the plates of board members directly, and hopefully be able to help facilitate the work of the departments too. And my approach is I am extremely team oriented. So I believe that we always work better together than we can alone. So I am a believer in teams. I'm not only going to be attending select board meetings, but I'm also going to be attending meetings of other public bodies, and I'll offer to help in any way that I can.
Definitely appreciate all the feedback. I mean, that's the whole point of this, is that this is your town, this is our town. So, and now we're dragging Margaret along with us. So whatever we can do to make it better.